Captain Lena Hart had been sitting in the officers' mess for 20 minutes, listening to Lieutenant Commander Jake Razor Morrison explain, for the third time, why women pilots would never have the reflexes for real air-to-air combat. She'd smiled politely, nodded in the right places, and said nothing about the 11 enemy aircraft she'd shot down in her previous deployment. Sometimes it was easier to let people believe what they wanted to believe. Then, the alarm klaxons started screaming. The bass loudspeakers crackled to life with words that made everyone's blood run cold. Scramble, 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 incoming enemy strike package, multiple bogies inbound, all available aircraft immediate launch. This is not a drill. Razor jumped up, knocking his coffee across the table. Finally! Some real action. He looked at Lena with what he probably thought was a reassuring smile. Don't worry, we've got this. You should probably head to the shelter. Lena stood slowly, picked up her flight bag that she always kept within reach, and headed for the door. Actually, she said quietly, I think I'll head to the flight line. Why? You a crew chief or something? She paused at the doorway, looked back at the dozen male pilots scrambling for their gear, and allowed herself a small smile. Or something. What happened over the next 47 minutes would become one of the most classified and most legendary air combat engagements in modern warfare. 4 enemy MiG-29s would enter the battle space. 4 would never leave. And every pilot in that mess hall would learn that the quiet logistics officer they'd been ignoring was actually Viper, the Air Force's most lethal air-to-air killer, with more confirmed kills than anyone currently flying. But none of them knew that yet. Lena Hart had been playing roles her entire life. At 5'5", with hazel eyes and brown hair, usually pulled back in a regulation bun, she'd learned early that being underestimated was often an advantage. People told you things when they didn't think you mattered. They made mistakes when they didn't see you as a threat. Her assignment to Al Azad Air Base had been listed as Logistics Coordination Officer, a deliberately vague title that gave her access to everything while attracting attention to nothing. On paper, she reviewed supply chains and coordinated equipment transfers. In reality, she was forward-deployed intelligence, gathering information on enemy air capabilities while maintaining her flight proficiency during classified night missions that officially never happened. The base commander knew. A handful of senior officers knew. Everyone else saw what they expected to see, a competent but unremarkable captain who pushed papers and occasionally asked annoying questions about fuel consumption rates. It was the perfect cover, right up until the enemy decided to launch a surprise daytime strike on a base they thought was minimally defended. The intelligence had been catastrophically wrong. Al Azad wasn't a minor logistics hub. It was home to a squadron of F-16 Fighting Falcons and a rotating detachment of special operations personnel conducting cross-border missions. The enemy had somehow discovered this, and they decided to eliminate the threat with overwhelming force before anyone could react. Lena had been in the mess hall conducting what she privately called social reconnaissance, listening to the pilots talk, gauging their skills, their egos, their potential reliability in combat. Razor Morrison was typical. Competent pilot, decent skills, massive ego. He'd been regaling the junior officers with stories of his almost kills, each story getting more elaborate with every telling. She'd heard versions of this story from dozens of pilots over the years. The guys who actually had kills rarely talked about them. The guys who talked constantly about kills rarely had any. Then the alarm had sounded, and everything changed. The flight line was controlled chaos. Ground crews were scrambling to prepare aircraft for immediate launch. Pilots were running from the operations building, already pulling on their flight suits and survival vests. The tower was broadcasting on all frequencies. Unknown aircraft bearing 270, range 80 miles, closing fast. Multiple contacts, estimate 12 to 15 aircraft in main strike package. Lena moved through the chaos with practiced calm, heading directly for the aircraft revetment that housed her F-16C, the one marked with generic tail numbers and no unit insignia. Her crew chief, Master Sergeant Chen, was already there, pulling the chocks and doing the final pre-flight inspection. "Ma'am!" Chen didn't salute, too much of a tell for who she really was. But his relief was obvious. "Thought you might be stuck in the admin building." "Not today, Sergeant." Lena was already climbing the ladder, running through her pre-flight checks with the speed that came from thousands of hours in the cockpit. "Status? Full fuel, full combat load. 4 AIM-120 AMRAAMs, 2 AIM-9X Sidewinders, full 20mm ammunition. Aircraft is Code 1 and ready to kill things, ma'am." "Outstanding. Clear me out as soon as I have power." Lena settled into the cockpit, the familiar embrace of the ejection seat harness and helmet connecting her to the aircraft. Her hands moved through the startup sequence automatically. Battery on, JFS start, watching gauges come alive, listening to the Pratt & Whitney F110 turbofan engine begin its distinctive whine. The F-16 had been her aircraft for 8 years. She knew every sound, every vibration, every quirk of the fly-by-wire system. This particular jet, tail number 471, had been with her for 3 years and 17 kills. Some pilots named their aircraft. Lena preferred to let the kill markers speak for themselves. Through her canopy, she could see other F-16s beginning to taxi. Razor was in the lead, his aircraft marked with his call sign and the elaborate shark mouth paint job that violated about 6 different regulations. Typical. Her radio crackled. "All available aircraft, this is Tower. Enemy strike package now bearing 265, range 60 miles, closing at 480 knots. We have visual identification, MiG-29 Fulcrums, approximately 14 aircraft in 2 groups. They're coming in fast and they're coming in heavy. MiG-29s, Russian-built, highly capable air superiority fighters, fast, maneuverable, and flown by pilots who'd been training for exactly this kind of strike mission. This wasn't going to be easy." Lena switched to the tactical frequency. "Tower, Viper checking in, ready for taxi." There was a pause. Then a different voice, the base commander, Colonel Sarah Hendricks. "Viper, Falcon lead, authenticate Alpha 79er. Lena pulled out her authentication card, found the code. "Authenticate Bravo 33. "Confirmed. Viper, you are weapons free and cleared for combat operations. Give them hell." "Roger that." She taxied out behind the main formation, watching Razor and his wingmen take the active runway. They launched in pairs, afterburners blazing, climbing hard to intercept the incoming threat. Lena waited her turn, running final combat checks. Radar, check. Weapon systems, check. Targeting pod, check. Countermeasures loaded and ready. Communications encrypted and secure. "Viper, you are cleared for takeoff, runway 27, winds 250 at 15, altimeter 29.92. Good hunting." Viper rolling. She advanced the throttle to military power, felt the F-16 strain against the brakes, then released them and slammed the throttle into afterburner. The jet leapt forward with 50,000 pounds of thrust, acceleration pinning her back into the seat. Airspeed building, 80 knots, 100, 120, 140. She rotated smoothly at 150 knots, and the F-16 leaped into the air like it had been launched from a catapult. Gear up, flaps up, accelerating through 300 knots, climbing hard, turning to intercept bearing. "Viper airborne, heading 270, climbing to Angels 20. "Copy, Viper. Be advised, Razor flight is engaging. Multiple bandits inbound. This is going to get messy." Messy was an understatement. At 20,000 feet, Lena could see the battlefield developing on her radar display. Razor and his 3 wingmen were vectoring to intercept the main enemy formation, 12 MiG-29s in 2 groups of 6, approaching in textbook Soviet-style combat formation. But her radar was showing something else. 4 additional contacts, lower and faster, taking a wide flanking route that would bring them in behind the base's defenders while everyone was focused on the main threat. Classic hammer and anvil. The main formation was the anvil, obvious, threatening, demanding attention. These 4 flankers were the hammer, sneaking in while everyone was distracted, ready to strike the base while its defenses were engaged elsewhere. Except nobody else had seen them yet. The flankers were flying low, using terrain masking and electronic warfare to hide from the base's radar. But Lena's F-16 had some upgrades that weren't in any official documentation, including a radar system that was generation ahead of what anyone expected. She keyed her mic. Falcon lead, Viper. I have 4 additional bandits, bearing 245, range 40 miles, Angels 5, speed 520 knots. They're flanking low while you engage the main force. Razor's voice came back, strained with the G-forces of combat maneuvering. Negative, Viper. We only show the main group. You sure about that? Positive. I'm breaking off to engage the flankers. You handle the main force. Wait, who authorized? Colonel Hendricks cut in. She's authorized, Razor. Viper, weapons free on the flankers. Keep them off our base. Roger. Viper, engaging. Lena rolled inverted and pulled hard, diving toward the deck and vectoring to intercept the flanking group. 4 MiG-29s flown by pilots good enough to sneak past the base defenses. This was going to be interesting. At 10,000 feet, she leveled off and went supersonic, the F-16 punching through Mach 1 with barely a shudder. Her radar locked onto the lead MiG at 35 miles. The enemy pilots still didn't know she was there. They were maintaining radio silence and focused on their attack run. Lena armed her AIM-120 AMRAAM missiles, advanced medium-range air-to-air missiles with active radar guidance, fire-and-forget technology that let her engage multiple targets quickly. At 30 miles, she achieved radar lock on the lead MiG. The targeting computer confirmed, good lock, valid target, weapon ready. Fox 3, she called, squeezing the trigger. The AMRAAM dropped from the rail and its rocket motor ignited, accelerating the missile to Mach 4 in seconds. It streaked away on a white contrail, tracking toward the lead MiG. She didn't wait to see if it hit. She was already locking the second MiG. Lock. Fox 3, second missile away, third MiG lock. Fox 3. 3 missiles in the air in less than 15 seconds. The enemy pilots still had no idea they were being hunted until the first missile hit. The lead MiG exploded in a fireball visible from 40 miles away. The formation immediately broke, pilots recognizing they were under attack and scattering in different directions. Break right! Break right! We have missiles inbound! The enemy flight leader's voice came across the tactical frequency. Panic clear even through the accent. Second missile impact. Another MiG transformed into falling debris and flame, but the third missile missed. The target MiG had gone into a violent defensive break, dumping flares and chaff while pulling maximum Gs. The AMRAAM's seeker head was confused by the countermeasures, and the missile detonated harmlessly several hundred meters away. No problem. Lena had planned for this. The fourth MiG was trying to run, going to full afterburner and diving for the deck where ground clutter might hide him, but Lena's radar held the lock. Fourth, AMRAAM away. Fox 3. This missile tracked perfectly, the MiG pilot's defensive maneuvers coming too late. The warhead detonated just behind the aircraft, shrapnel tearing through the tailplane and engine. The MiG began trailing smoke and fire. Mayday! Mayday, I'm hit! Ejecting! The pilot punched out, his ejection seat rocketing him clear of the dying aircraft seconds before it impacted the ground. 3 down, 1 remaining. The surviving MiG pilot was good. He'd recognized what was happening and gone immediately into offensive mode, turning hard toward Lena's F-16, trying to get a missile shot before she could engage him. Lena saw the move coming. This pilot wasn't panicking. He was fighting back. Dangerous. Her radar warning receiver screamed. The MiG had achieved radar lock and was launching. Defending! Lena broke hard left, pulling 9 Gs that made her vision gray at the edges despite her anti-G suit. She punched out chaff and flares, filling the sky with countermeasures while destroying the MiG's targeting solution with violent maneuvering. The enemy missile, a Russian R-77, streaked past her canopy close enough that she could see the fins. Too close. Both aircraft were now in a turning fight, each trying to get into firing position. This was old-school dogfighting, the kind that happened when long-range missiles failed and you had to kill the enemy with short-range weapons or guns. Lena's training took over. The F-16 was lighter and more maneuverable than the MiG-29, but only if flown perfectly. She needed to force an overshoot, make the MiG pilot push too hard and blow past her, giving her the angle for a shot. She went vertical, the F-16 climbing straight up under full afterburner, trading speed for altitude. The MiG followed, both aircraft locked in a vertical scissors, each pilot trying to force the other to make a mistake. At 15,000 feet, Lena rolled inverted at the top of her climb and pulled through, converting altitude back into speed as she dove. The MiG tried to follow, but made the critical error, pulled too hard, bled off too much energy. Lena had her opening. She rolled right, pulling into a hard lag pursuit that put her on the MiG's tail, but offset to prevent the enemy pilot from reversing the situation. The targeting pipper in her heads-up display tracked across the enemy aircraft. AEM-9, X-Sidewinder, close-range infrared missile, impossible to defeat once locked. Tone, lock, Fox 2. The Sidewinder leapt off the rail, tracking flawlessly. The MiG pilot saw it coming, tried to brake, dumped flares desperately. But the AIM-9X was a generation ahead of anything the enemy expected. Its imaging infrared seeker ignored the flares and tracked the MiG's hot engine exhaust with perfect precision. Impact! The warhead detonated against the MiG's left engine. The aircraft tumbled out of control, fire streaming from the destroyed power plant. Lena watched long enough to see the pilot eject successfully. Then she was already scanning for new threats. 4 MiGs engaged, 4 MiGs destroyed. Time elapsed, 11 minutes. She keyed her radio. Falcon lead Viper, 4 flankers splashed. I'm Winchester on AMRAAMs, but still have 2 Sidewinders and guns. Status of main force? Razor's voice came back, and for the first time it held respect instead of dismissal. Viper, Falcon lead. You just killed 4 bandits, solo? Affirmative. What's your status? We've engaged the main force, splashed 3, but we're outnumbered and they're pressing hard. We could use... Holy shit, break left, break left! The radio erupted with the chaos of combat. Warnings, call-outs, missile launches. The main force engagement wasn't going well. Lena checked her fuel. Enough for another 15 minutes of combat. She turned hard, lighting afterburner, racing toward the main engagement. Falcon lead, Viper inbound your position. Hold on. The main air battle was a swirling furball of 12 aircraft trying to kill each other in the same piece of sky. Contrails marked the paths of aircraft pulling maximum G turns. Smoke trails from missiles stitched through the air. 2 parachutes drifted down, 1 friendly, 1 enemy. Lena's radar showed the tactical situation immediately. Razor and his remaining 2 wingmen were outnumbered 6-3, separated and fighting for their lives. The MiGs were pressing aggressively, their numerical advantage allowing them to attack from multiple angles. She needed to change the equation fast. Falcon flight, Viper entering the fight from southwest. Stay clear of my 12 o'clock. She came in fast, identified the nearest MiG harassing Razor's wingman. The enemy pilot was so focused on his target that he never saw Lena's F-16 drop in behind him. Guns, 20mm cannon, old school. She squeezed the trigger. The M61 Vulcan cannon roared, 6,000 rounds per minute of 20mm high-explosive ammunition tearing through the air. The targeting computer guided her fire perfectly. Rounds walked up the MiG's fuselage, shattering the canopy and destroying the aircraft's hydraulics. The MiG fell away, pilot ejecting immediately. Splash 5, Lena called calmly, already turning to engage the next threat. The MiG pilots suddenly realized they had a new problem. Their tactical advantage evaporated as Lena tore through their formation, her F-16 appearing and disappearing in the chaos of combat like a ghost. Another MiG appeared in her gun sight. She fired again, hit. The enemy aircraft spun away, smoking. Splash 6. Now the enemy pilots were in full defensive mode, breaking off their attacks to deal with this new threat. But Lena had spent years studying Soviet-style fighter tactics. She knew how they thought, how they moved, how they reacted to pressure. She used that knowledge ruthlessly. An enemy pilot tried to reverse on her, pulling into a vertical scissors. She went with him, let him think he was gaining position, then snap-rolled in a maneuver that put her instantly on his tail. Last Sidewinder, lock, Fox 2 kill, Splash 7. The remaining MiGs broke off engagement and ran, diving for the deck and heading for the border at maximum speed. They'd had enough. 12 aircraft had entered this battle space. 7 were destroyed, 5 were retreating. Falcon lead, Viper. Bandits are running. Do we pursue? Colonel Hendricks' voice. Negative, Viper. Let them go. I want you and Falcon flight back on deck. Good work. Lena did a final tactical scan, confirmed no remaining threats, and turned for home. Her fuel was getting low and her ammunition was exhausted. Time to land, rearm, and be ready for round 2 if it came. As she turned final approach, Lena could see the runway and the crowd gathered by the operations building. Word had apparently spread about what had just happened. She landed smoothly, taxied in, and shut down the engine. When she climbed out of the cockpit, the entire squadron was there. Razor was in front, his expression a mixture of embarrassment and awe. You're Viper, he said flatly. The Viper. 11 kills over Syria, 6 over Yemen, now 7 more today. 24 confirmed. You're the highest scoring air-to-air pilot in the entire Air Force. Lena removed her helmet, shook out her hair. It's 28 now. She looked around at the assembled pilots. Anyone have a problem with female pilots not having the reflexes for real air-to-air combat? Silence. Good. Then let's debrief this mission and figure out how they got so close without our early warning systems catching them. Because that's the real problem we need to solve. The debriefing lasted 3 hours. Lena walked the entire squadron through the engagement, using every contact as a teaching moment, how she'd identified the flanking maneuver, why she'd engaged at specific ranges, how she'd managed her ammunition to ensure she had options throughout the fight, the tactics that gave her advantages in turning combat. Razor listened intently, taking notes, asking intelligent questions. The embarrassment was gone, replaced by professional respect. He'd seen real combat now, understood the difference between bragging about almost kills and actually achieving them. The younger pilots hung on her every word. Lieutenant Maria Santos, one of only 2 other female pilots in the squadron, sat in the front row with a notebook, documenting everything. She'd been quiet during Razor's earlier pontificating, but now her questions were sharp and tactical. When you went vertical against the 4th MiG, Santos asked, you were trading speed for altitude at a moment when he had energy advantage. What made you confident you could convert that back into a winning position? Lena smiled. Good question. This was someone who understood energy management in air combat. I'd been watching his turns for 30 seconds, Lena explained. He was aggressive but predictable. Every hard turn, he'd pull maximum G without thinking about energy conservation. I knew if I forced him vertical, he'd follow instinctively and overcommit. The vertical wasn't about gaining altitude, it was about baiting him into bleeding energy he couldn't afford to lose. She pulled up the flight recorder data on the big screen. Watch here. He follows me up, pulls hard to stay with me, and there, see his airspeed. He's down to 180 knots at the top. At that speed, the MiG-29 handles like a truck. Meanwhile, I've rolled inverted and I'm accelerating downhill. By the time he realizes the mistake, I've got 450 knots and I'm converting that into position. Santos nodded, scribbling notes. Several other pilots were doing the same. Afterward, Colonel Hendricks pulled Lena aside. The intelligence community is having a nervous breakdown, the colonel said. The enemy knew too much about this base. This wasn't a random strike. This was targeted. We have a leak somewhere. What do you need from me? Keep doing what you're doing. Logistics officer by day, lethal air superiority fighter when needed. See what you can find out through your channels. But Lena, Hendricks paused. Your cover is blown with the squadron. Everyone knows what you can do now. That's fine. The cover was to hide from the enemy, not our own people. And honestly, it might be better this way. These pilots needed to see that gender doesn't matter in the cockpit. Results matter. There's something else. Your engagement is all over the intelligence channels. 7 kills in one mission, 4 of them before the enemy even knew you were there. The other side is going to want revenge. Specifically, they're going to want you. Let them try. Hendricks smiled grimly. That's what I like about you, Captain. No quit. Over the next few days, the base went back to normal operations, or as normal as operations could be after a major air battle. Lena resumed her logistics duties, but now pilots sought her out for advice, for training, for combat experience she could share. She established a weekly tactical training session where she'd walk through historical air combat engagements, breaking down what worked and what didn't. Attendance was mandatory for junior pilots, but even the experienced ones showed up. Razor became one of her most dedicated students. He'd had his ego shattered and rebuilt in the same day, and emerged a better pilot for it. "I was an idiot in that mess hall," he admitted to her one evening after a training session. "Everything I thought I knew about air combat was theoretical. You've actually done it, repeatedly, against people trying to kill you. I should have been listening instead of talking." "You weren't an idiot," Lena said. "You were confident, which isn't a bad thing. You just needed the experience to back it up. Now you have that. Use it." 2 weeks later, intelligence intercepted enemy communications, specifically mentioning the female American pilot who killed 7 of our best. They were planning something. Revenge for the losses, an attempt to reclaim their honor. "They're going to come for you specifically," Hendricks said during their classified briefing. "Probably their top pilot. This will be personal." "Good," Lena said. "Personal fights are predictable. They'll be emotional, aggressive. That gives me an advantage." The enemy's top pilot was everything intelligence had promised: experienced, aggressive, flying a MiG-29, upgraded with the latest Russian avionics. His name was Colonel Mikhail Volkov, call sign Berkut, Eagle. 32 confirmed kills, veteran of multiple conflicts, trained by the best Russian instructors. His psychological profile suggested a man who viewed air combat as personal honor. He took losses personally, especially to pilots he considered inferior. A female pilot killing 7 of his countrymen would be an insult he couldn't ignore. Intelligence was right. 3 weeks after Lena's engagement, Volkov issued a challenge over the tactical frequency that everyone monitored. His English was accented but clear. "This is Burkett to the American pilot called Viper. I know you hear this. 7 of my brothers you killed. This is not war. This is murder. I challenge you. 1 aircraft, 1 pilot, you and me. We settle this with honor, not hiding behind technology and numbers." The message repeated 3 times, then silence. "It's a trap," Razor said immediately when they gathered in the operations center. "He's trying to draw you into an ambush." "No way he fights fair." "Probably," Lena agreed. "But if I don't respond, he'll keep hitting our patrols, trying to draw me out. People will die. Better to settle this directly." Colonel Hendricks shook her head. "I can't authorize this. It's exactly what he wants." "Ma'am, with respect, this is happening whether we authorize it or not. He's made it personal. If I don't face him, he'll escalate until I have no choice. At least this way, we control the circumstances. And if it is an ambush, then I'll handle it the same way I handled the flankers. Sir, I've been doing this a long time. Trust me." Hendricks looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Radar surveillance only. Weapons tight for all other aircraft. But you have full support if this goes sideways." "Won't need it." The next morning, Lena took off solo at dawn, climbing to 20,000 feet over neutral territory. Burkett was waiting, his MiG-29 circling lazily, confident. She checked her radar. No other aircraft within 50 miles. Either this really was one-on-one, or his backup was running so low and quiet she couldn't detect them. She'd assume the latter and be pleasantly surprised if it was the former. "So you came. Brave or foolish?" Burkett's voice was casual, almost friendly. "Let's find out," Lena replied. "Before we begin, I want you to know, I respect your skill. 7 kills is impressive. But today, you face someone who has been doing this since before you were born. Nothing personal." "Everything about this is personal, Berkut. You made it that way. But it doesn't matter. Skill isn't about age or gender. It's about who makes those better decisions under pressure. Let's see who that is." They merged at closing speed over Mach 1, both aircraft pulling through violent turns that would have torn apart lesser machines. Burkett was everything advertised: skilled, aggressive, unpredictable. His MiG-29 was upgraded with thrust vectoring, giving him post-stall maneuvering capability that the standard F-16 couldn't match. But Lena had one advantage he didn't know about. She'd studied every piece of footage available on his previous kills. She knew his favorite tactics, his patterns, his tells. He was aggressive in the first 2 minutes, trying to establish dominance. Then he'd shift to patient, methodical flying if the quick kill didn't materialize. She needed to survive the aggressive phase and exploit the transition. The first 3 minutes were brutal. Burkett came at her with everything, pulling maneuvers that pushed his aircraft to the edge of its flight envelope. The thrust vectoring let him point his nose at impossible angles, getting missile locks that should have been impossible. But getting a lock wasn't the same as making a kill. Lena's defensive flying was perfect, breaking locks with precise timing, using terrain and energy management to stay alive while burning through his missile inventory. His first 2 R-77 missiles missed. The third came close enough that she felt the warhead detonate behind her aircraft, shrapnel pinging off her tail. Damage, but nothing critical. Then she saw what she was waiting for. Burkett's flying changed. The aggressive maneuvers stopped. He settled into a methodical pursuit, trying to force her into a position where his superior thrust-to-weight ratio would give him the advantage. That was his tell. Time to turn this around. Lena reversed hard, accepting the momentary vulnerability to force a head-on pass. Burkett took the bait, diving in for what should have been an easy guns kill, but Lena knew something he didn't. The F-16's gun was bore-sighted slightly off-axis, designed for snapshots during high-G maneuvering. She didn't need perfect alignment. She needed close enough. They passed canopy to canopy at a combined closure rate over Mach 2. Lena fired. The 20mm cannon rounds walked through the air where Burkett's MiG would be in half a second. Hits. Not catastrophic, but enough. Rounds tore through his left wing root, severing hydraulic lines and damaging control surfaces. Burkett's MiG rolled violently, the pilot fighting for control. His voice came over the radio, frustrated but still professional. Good shooting. Very good. But this is not over. He was right. The MiG was damaged but still flying, still dangerous. But now Lena had the advantage. Burkett had to defend, had to manage his damaged aircraft, had to think about survival instead of killing. She pressed the attack methodically, forcing him into defensive maneuvers that aggravated the damage. His MiG began trailing smoke. The left wing was losing pieces. Finally, after 17 minutes of combat, Lena maneuvered into position for a shot he couldn't defend against. Last sidewinder. Lock. Perfect tone. Burkett, you're done. Eject now or take the missile. Your choice. There was a pause. Then, good kill, Viper. You earned this. You're better pilot than I thought possible. Gender means nothing. Skill is skill. He ejected before she could fire, the MiG tumbling out of control before exploding against a mountainside. Lena circled once, verified the parachute deployment, and headed home. 29 confirmed kills, the most lethal air-to-air pilot in American service. And she'd done it by proving that ability mattered more than assumptions. Back at base, the squadron met her on the flight line. Not to celebrate, though there would be time for that later, but to learn. They'd watched the engagement on Datalink, seen how she'd managed every phase of the fight. That transition at minute 3, Santos said immediately, when you reversed into the head-on pass, that was textbook reading the opponent's psychology. You waited for him to shift tactics, then exploited the exact moment when his mindset changed. Lena nodded. He was good enough that I couldn't beat him in a pure energy fight, so I had to beat him psychologically, make him think he was winning, then turn his confidence into vulnerability. Razor was shaking his head in amazement. You just beat their best pilot. That's going to make you a legend, Lena smiled. I was already a legend, Jake. You just didn't know it. She headed for the debriefing, already thinking about the intelligence value of this engagement, the lessons to share with the squadron, the next mission waiting somewhere over the horizon. Behind her, the squadron watched her go. The quiet logistics officer who'd been sitting in their mess hall, listening to them brag about kills they didn't have, while hiding the fact that she'd achieved more than all of them combined. They'd underestimated her. The enemy had underestimated her. Everyone always did. That was fine. Captain Lena Hart had built a career on being underestimated, and every time she proved them wrong at Mach 2 with a missile lock they never saw coming. The ones who learned from it, like Razor and Santos, became better pilots. The ones who didn't, like Berkut,